Hey, everybody. Welcome to the session. I'm Casper Johansson, partner and co-founder of the Spartan Group. We're a crypto advisor and VC, and I'm here with Lily Liu, the president of Solana Foundation. Welcome, Lily.
Thanks. Good to be here. Hi, Casper.
Hi. So we've got a very highly anticipated session, I'm told, and I've got a lot of questions from you. I'm not sure we'll get through all of it, but before we jump into Solana specifically, maybe you could just give us a quick background of yourself.
Sure. I'm Lily, and I first got into Bitcoin 10 years ago. So this is my 10th year in blockchain. When I first got started, it was really just Bitcoin, maybe some other coins, but it was really just Bitcoin. Ethereum didn't even exist at the time. Let's see, I started my career in traditional finance. I worked at Morgan Stanley once upon a time and McKinsey, and then also KKR. And then I was building hospitals in China for a few years before I kind of chanced upon this crazy thing called Bitcoin. Pretty sure it was a scam until I read the white paper, and I quickly realized after that that there was it was a very profound invention. And 10 years later, here we are.
All right, great. Well, I know you're also a successfully exited founder and you have a lot of experience to bring to the Solana Foundation. So, in terms of Solana's ecosystem, it's seen tremendous growth. Just in the last few years alone, a 10x increase in developers. What do you think are the key factors for this expansion? And as president of the Solana Foundation and your team, how are you guys involved in fostering this growth?
Sure. So we thought a lot about, first and foremost, what is Solana? What is an L1? Clearly, it's a blockchain. That goes without saying. It's a very literal definition of what an L1 is and what something like Solana is. But we also see Solana as certainly being a technology platform. I think that view of the world has also been very well articulated, starting with Ethereum, the introduction of smart contracts, and the ability to build decentralized applications. That's kind of the next kind of layer of what a blockchain is. And then the third, and I think we've really, spent a lot of time thinking about this and articulating this, is a layer one blockchain is also a city. And that's a metaphor we use quite often because really what you're trying to do is you're trying to attract capital and also talent to come build the Solana city. 4 years ago, Solana, I think, was launched only in March 2020. That's before I got involved. Zero blocks, zero builders, and basically, one of many, many chains out there. And I think what has made Solana so distinctive is Solana kind of very successfully sits on this knife edge between being really deep, cool tech and being very appealing to some of the most bona fide builders out there. But then also in terms of culture and community and really sort of being not just a cool place to hang out, but really sort of an optimistic community of practical, kind of kind folks that are here to really build something cool. It kind of has that culture about it. And fosters that community, and that is kind of like the city part of it, right? And I think that the Solana community has really been very kind of constructive and productive around both aspects of that. And so, on each of those kind of levels, the blockchain continues to see a lot of sort of deep tech innovation, technology platform. There's a lot of cool dApps and very innovative dApps that are being launched. But then on top of that, it's a community that has like a very aspirational culture to it. And I think that all three of those things are really important to get right and really hard to get right.
Got it. I can attest to that. Having first worked personally and invested in Solana like late 19 or early 20s, so kind of right around the same time. And I think from my perspective, the culture is to a large extent driven, obviously, from the founders, right? And they have that mix, as you say, of deep technical knowledge and culture kind of embedded. And having been to the Breakpoint conferences too, there's a real cultural vibe there too, on top of just all the tech development. So yeah, totally agree with that. And one of the things that, in terms of attracting developers, and one of the things that developers have been mentioning since day one is just this point around dev tooling, where obviously the more mature change will have more dev tooling because it also just accumulates over time. But I know that now there is, and I'd love you to talk a little bit about how it fits into the Solana picture also in terms of where it sits. But Anza is there, and they're doing a lot of work to enhance the both network performance, but also the developer experience. And the tooling has developed a lot on Solana. So how do you see their role, and how do you see the role of dev tooling for kind of a layer one chain slash tech platform?
Yeah. Look, the immediate sort of user of the Solana blockchain is, of course, developers, right? And so, if you look back in the 2017, 2018 kind of generation of blockchains when there was the ICO era, and then it was pretty clear that scaling Ethereum mainnet would have some structural and very long-term issues. So this whole generation of different architectures to the media at the time liked to term it as Ethereum killers. I think that's the wrong framing.
Yeah,
But regardless, this idea around, could you build a better architecture, which is the beginning. But then of all of those different blockchains that launched, really the only kind of standalone developer community that has emerged is Solana, right? If you look around, the other developer communities are either of small scale, or they essentially sort of went to market on EVM in
right.
order to in order to build on top of that existing base of developers. So it's a pretty hard thing to do. We've been focused quite a bit on giving grants for public goods. A lot of that is developer tooling, so that developer tooling over time can reach parity of what you can find in the EVM world, right? That's a huge corpus of work. Anza is one of many contributors to that. And that's been going back to the whole sort of Solana as a blockchain technology platform, as well as kind of like a city and a community. Of course, underlying all of that is the continued evolution and continued advancement of the blockchain itself, right? And the dev tooling kind of sits
Right.
right on top of that to enable sort of the technology platform to really take shape. So there's been a lot of work on that front. I would say that dev tooling aside, there's like the entire sort of new validator client, Agave, that Onze is building. I think that's even sort of more fundamental than dev tooling. There's been a lot of work around preparing for a multi-client world when aspects of Firedancer come available later this year. There's something that's going to be call it Franken-Dancer, which is a combination of
Good
Firedancer
name.
and agave. We do take our naming seriously. Try to tell it exactly as it is. And then I would say that in addition to developer tooling, which to me typically refers to tools that enhance, accelerate, and make more efficient the developer experience, I would say that one thing Solana has been really excellent at is also really investing in sort of protocol adjacent innovation. And so
Right.
that things like state compression that was rolled out about a little over a year ago, that basically took token metadata, put it on a Merkle tree, and effectively what that does is it takes, for example, the cost of minting NFTs down to a couple $100s for 1 million NFTs, right? And so I think that the approach and the kind of the philosophy that is that underlies Solana from really the beginning is that the network should always be getting better, right? The core way for the network to always be getting better is probably that core metric of TPS that a lot of people like to refer to. But it's not just TPS, although of course that's a starting point. It's also it's also building sort of protocol adjacent things, such as state compression, such as token extensions, to enable use cases to be built faster, easier, right? And
Got
so,
it.
to me, that starts to blend between, making develop tooling, which is easier to build and deploy an app type of thing, and additional frameworks like Anchor to make it easier to build an app, right? That's dev tooling, but then in addition, there's kind of protocol adjacent innovation like state compression, like token extensions, to where if you want to launch a stable coin with all sorts of features that would typically be very complicated to build, you can basically do it out of the box.
Got it. And just coming back to the point on Fire Dancer, so that's obviously a very highly anticipated launch in terms of it coming onto mainnet. I don't know how much you can talk about timing expectations around the mainnet launch, but also very curious to hear, so with the Fire Dancer launch, obviously that'll take TPS to a whole new level. But exactly to your point, going back to the Ethereum killer days where it's all about TPS, like that is still very important. But what, in addition to speed, how do you see the impact of Fire Dancer and what it enables on top of Solana?
Yeah. So having a multiple client ecosystem is something that I believe really only Ethereum has. And so client diversity, it's a huge, it's a huge undertaking for any ecosystem to build. And so that in and of itself sort of adds a layer of kind of resilience and just client diversity does a lot of things for network health, right? So that's something that is a pretty big deal for Solana because again, nearly all other ecosystems rely on a single client. And so, when one talks about decentralization in blockchain, I remember back in 2018, I think 2017 actually, we wrote a paper on quantifying decentralization, right? It's not just the number of nodes, it's not just supermajority, but there's various aspects of it, diversity of holders, right? Decentralization of holders, decentralization also of clients. And so this is like a pretty existential and pretty important part of sort of the long-term evolution and health of a network, right? So there's that. And then of course there's TPS, and that's kind of like the easiest thing for folks to kind of
Point
look
two.
for.
Yeah.
So Franken Dancer ideally should be coming later this year.
Okay.
And I think if you put a gun to anyone's head, I don't think anyone would be like, okay, Casper, Fire Dancer is going to deliver this TPS on this date in the field. But if we get to something like 100,000, that would be pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And thus far, the
That's
current
on Franken Dancer, you think? The
probably
100K?
Fire
Okay.
Dancer net. But right
Okay.
now, we're around 3,000, and some of those are vote transactions. And so if we can get all increase overall to 100K, that's a pretty meaningful change in performance. And we're already sort of best in field, and so that's a pretty meaningful change when paired with things like state compression, and we're now working on generalized state compression. Then that means in aggregate, it's not just TPS, but it's the performance with which you can do the thing you want to do is going to get a lot better and faster and cheaper, right?
Right.
It's very easy to talk about cost and speed, and of course things really start there. But to me, cost and speed is not just about the first order effects of that, which is cost and speed, right? It's really about having sort of performance open up design space for new applications.
Yeah.
And so, I think if you look at a company like Netflix, Netflix used to be mailing DVDs when we were all on dial-up modems. And then bandwidth came. And yes, bandwidth, broadband internet came. And of course, you could say, well, it's just faster and cheaper than dial-up. It is that. But what it really did is it put us on the path to where Netflix could be a streaming company.
Yep.
So is Netflix the same company? Yes. Is the product the same? Well, in a way, they're helping you consume content. But outside of that very general similarity, it's an entirely different company and product
Yeah.
enabled by upgraded infrastructure. So I think, when we talk about the nuts and bolts in the very first order way, that is the starting point, but it's really not about that. It's about enabling new design space.
Got it. And then just to follow up on that, do you think there is a threshold above which we start enabling these, or is it like a sliding scale? Like the Netflix equivalent, is that at 30K TPS, 100K? Do we need to reach a million first, or does it really depend?
Yeah, I think that Fire Dancer will create a lot of very needed block space. And what I feel like we've also found in 2021, and most certainly recently as well, is that the demand for block space in a very active and robust ecosystem is going to be gargantuan and will continue to grow.
Yeah.
And so we saw that recently with meme coins. think whatever you want about meme coins. I know that's a topic of discussion as to their
Yeah, we
merit.
could have a separate session on that.
To
Yeah.
have a separate session on that. My hot take is that meme coins are to retail as governance tokens are to VCs and institutions. So that's my
Hmm.
hot take.
Okay,
Uh,
interesting. Yeah.
and so they're basically just meme coins for left curve and right curve is I think what they are. But I think demand for block space in an active ecosystem will always continue to grow in leaps and bounds. Uh, so um, so I think, basically it's not just about improving mainnet throughput, but it's also continuing to invest in protocol adjacent efficiencies
Right.
that will enable specific use cases that people want to use blockchain for. And that's not an unlimited list, right?
Right. So if I'm going to paraphrase, I guess you're saying it's similar to traditional compute power. There is no threshold. It needs to keep improving because there'll be more and more use as use cases improve and technology develops, and it's kind of just it's a constant movement.
I think it does need to be constant movement.
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen so far with Bitcoin, for example, the underlying philosophy of Bitcoin was that very contrarian take. It should not change, right? That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
the knockdown, drag out fight of 2016. And it was stability, not just stability, but really stagnation at all costs. Like stagnation was the innovation in and of itself, right? Sound money,
Yeah. Yeah.
everything else changes in the world around you. This doesn't.
Yeah.
And so that's quite interesting because, at the time, the narrative around Bitcoin could have been many different things. And then we sort of settled on digital gold really after 2016, when actually before that, the narrative was fairly hotly contested, right?
Yeah.
And hotly discussed. So I think that if Solana's perspective is really the opposite, that the network should continue to innovate, get better, and expand the amount of block space available, which if the sign of success is running out of block space actually. And
Right.
so a lot of folks like to ask out about outages. Uh,
Yeah, that was my next question. So
yeah,
let's talk about that because
right.
it is something we need to just address, right? I think it's a natural evolution for something that's growing quickly,
Yeah.
right? But I'd love to hear your take on that in terms of
Yeah.
where we're going.
Yeah, so there was an outage, I believe, in February. Before that, there's nearly a year of 100% uptime. There are actually, if you look at all blockchains, quite a number of blockchains do have downtime. In fact, more downtime is in terms of number of hours during the year than Solana. Some of those are planned, some of that is unplanned, although it is a good question as to how you can plan outage for a decentralized network. My take on that is if it's truly decentralized, you cannot plan downtime, really, right?
Yeah.
But leaving that point aside, so there are quite a number of blockchains that have downtime. It is
I
less
guess you
noted.
can plan it and then see if everybody decides to do it.
That's not planning, that's suggesting, right?
Suggesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it should not necessarily happen every single time anyway, it's a separate matter.
Yeah.
So there's been quite a bit of downtime across many networks. In fact, total number of hours over the year, in some cases more than Solana. But maybe it goes unnoticed because there's fewer people watching is probably part of it. I'm not saying this to say that outages are okay or should be expected. I think that obviously you want to have 0.0000% outages.
Yeah.
I do want to point out that it is still early from a technology standpoint, and no matter how much you stress your test net, there is always some possibility that when you see an practically overnight 10x usage of the chain, that something could happen, right? It is certainly the aspiration for that to be, 0 hours, 0 minutes throughout the year. But maybe one of the reasons why a lot of that is being noticed is because Solana does have so much activity and is having these kind of 10x spikes in usage from time to
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
People care
people
because
use
there
it.
is a lot of activity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things going on in Solana, right? I want to touch upon all of them, but I doubt we'll have time for all of them. But there's the DeFi, there's meme coins, there's DPIN, there's NFTs. I'm interested in talking about all of them, but I don't know if there's one of those topics you want to spend our last 5, 7 minutes on, or we can pick a couple of them.
Yeah, I think DeFi or financial use case is generally something that I'm
Okay.
really passionate about. My
Yeah.
perspective on that is, and that's perhaps fitting given it's SCB, and that's that is the core business of SCB. I think the financial use cases really are the original vision of blockchain. If you look at the
Yeah.
Bitcoin white paper, it's the peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And it fundamentally proposed self-custody leading to global financial system, self-sovereignty, digital property rights, programmable money, right? That's kind of the world that it opened up. And I think that's still the not the only, but certainly a core use case of blockchain that kind of needs to be in place in order to even enable the others, right? As part of
Right.
the vision of blockchain is really to sort of bring financialization to both long tail of existing markets and then also bring financialization to new product markets that could never be financialized, really. And so therefore, I think that really with DeFi, which we currently equate with trading and with, whether it's buy, sell on AMM or CLOB on chain or a lend borrow, really that to me is just the beginning. I think that what we're going to start to see is I think we're going to start to see more microcredit markets based around things like buy now, pay never, right? Uh, Payroll financing, supply chain letter credit factoring, right? AP/AR financing, creator financing, those types of things that were in a sense kind of the original dream, actually, sort of taking all of that financial stuff and tokenizing those assets and making them sort of interoperable and also globally accessible by putting them all on a single layer, right? So that to me is still the grand vision of blockchain from the very beginning. When I look around, I think that Solana is really the only one that can do that. Because you have to have a performant chain, you've got to have a developer ecosystem, and you've also got
Yeah.
to have asset liquidity all in the same place at the same time. And that to me is what I think is really exciting about not just being a blockchain, but what Solana I think can uniquely do. So when we talk about DeFi on Solana, there's kind of like the core DeFi protocols that we all know and love, right? Orca, Radium, Jupiter, Camino, Margin, many more. I think there's about 150 different DeFi
Yeah.
projects. Most of those are built around buy sell use cases, trading use cases. And that's a necessary starting point because you need to have a robust liquidity sort of buy sell mechanism in order to be able to provide price stability for whatever other use cases are going to exist, right? But I don't think that it starts and ends with trading on chain. I think where we're going to
Yeah.
go next, especially with sort of a burgeoning stablecoin ecosystem, is I think we're going to get into what we call PayFi, but kind of settlement-based new financial primitives based on a payment.
So do you see a scenario where, for example, a lot of the stablecoin activity that's right now happening on Tron or Ethereum basically moves over to Solana?
I think so, because I think just practically speaking, it's kind of the place to be, right? Ethereum, to Ethereum's credit, got the whole thing started and has
Yeah.
a lot of asset liquidity and created use cases and different parts of the value chain around, for example, using a stable coin on chain with Uniswap and with Compound is really the pioneers of that. And then Tron was necessary also to their credit because it's much more affordable and timely way of using a stablecoin, which, of course, people want stablecoins for all sorts of different reasons, especially if you live in a non-US dollar part of the world. But I think that building on top of a payments layer, it's pretty hard to do in both of those different cases. And it's something that's quite easy to do in something like Solana. So we touched upon token extensions earlier. I think one of the cool things, for example, is we were talking about protocol adjacent innovation. So token extensions, we just rolled that out. It's really a fuller featured fungible token library. So SPL is what
Yeah.
typically considered to be our like ERC20, if you will. Token extensions is SPL on steroids because you now out of the box can embed into a fungible token things like transfer fees, things like transfer hooks, which means every time you send a token, you can have it automatically run code. And so you could, for example, implement a blacklist or whitelist upon every transfer, right? And you
Yep.
can imagine any number of reasons you want to do that for stable coins and then also for real world assets. You can also encode continuous interest compounding into a fungible token, which is pretty awesome because typically, that might take quite a lot of code to write.
Yep.
Permanent delegation, so whoever issued the token, this is relevant in asset issuance, would be able to revoke that token. And that you don't necessarily want to do that stablecoin, but you very much want to do that with, for example, a tokenized alternative asset. So those are some of the ways where we kind of have been thinking about, really the original vision of blockchain. And then what are some ways that we can sort of continuously improve the experience, starting with developers in order to actually make these use cases much easier, much friendlier to build.
And are you seeing like that innovation? Is that something that you would say is, or how much of that is organic out of the Solana ecosystem versus inspired what you see in other ecosystems? How much of it is coming from the core team versus like the community?
Yeah. I think really a lot of the innovation is coming from the community. Now, something like token extensions is being built by Onza, right? Because it's pretty deep tech to be able to build this. And there aren't that many people that really understand the core protocol in such great detail to be able to build something like token extensions, right?
Yeah.
But then building something like Drip House on top of state compression is something that really talented founders in the ecosystem build and sort of have the vision and the ability to build something like that and really make artists, creators come alive in entirely different ways and engage communities in entirely different ways. So, I think that I think ultimately this is tooling and for people in the community to be building the applications that they envision. And so it's really mostly done by the community. And we as the foundation are here to support, to listen, and really there's like a small handful of things that we can uniquely support on,
Right.
and just try to do that.
So just picking up your last point on community, and we're pretty much at time, but I just want to make sure. I mean, obviously, there's lots of places to learn about Solana, but we've mentioned a lot of different concepts and new products and initiatives here. Where would you just pointing people to both to kind of find you, follow you guys virtually, like online, and also I know you have a lot of on-site in real life physical events.
Certainly. Yep. So on Twitter, we're simply at Solana. I'm personally at CA Lily Lu. We are holding our first Breakpoint, which is our annual conference. We're holding our first Breakpoint in Asia this year in Singapore. September
Yes, we look
20th.
forward to welcoming you
Yes.
here.
Look forward to having you there as well, Casper. We also hold hacker houses throughout the year. We're doing London and Bangalore in July, Hong Kong in October. We've thrown some pretty amazing hacker houses around the world multiple times.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, the community has been really active in throwing community events. So Solana Summit's going to be throwing 4 different events this year. We have Island DAO coming up in Greece, and that's just a starting list. So.
All right. Great. Well, thanks so much, Lily. We're at time. I really appreciate you spending half an hour with us today. And there was lots of questions and topics we didn't cover, but I think we got through a lot. So thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to SCB10X.